All right, so now that we have a feel for sort of what we're doing with seventh chords, where we're just adding more thirds on top of triads, and we've got the concept where we're thinking of them in two parts, the triad plus the seventh, let's actually get in and look at a couple examples. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at 3 different types of seventh chords. We're going to look at those that are built on a major triad and on a minor triad. So that's what we're going to look at. Let's get in there and see what we can figure out about these chords. So let's start by talking about what happens when we add sevenths to a major triad. And what we're going to find is that there are 2 different options here, and they're really, really, really distinct from one another despite not being super different pitch-wise. So, okay, here's the first, and this is what we call the major seventh chord. And so you can see, just like the sort of title of this slide suggests, the foundation of this chord is a major triad. So if we look, we've got C, E, G, it's a major triad, and on top of that, we're putting a major seventh from C to B natural, right? And we get this lush, beautiful chord. So again, it's a major seventh interval from the root to the seventh of this chord. And that's sort of where this title comes from. That's what we're really describing here. When we talk about the major seventh chord, it's all about a major triad and a major seventh on top of that, right? We can hear this is one of the more shimmery chords. When we really think about this, that leading tone in C major, B natural is really emphasized here. We really think about this chord as being super oriented around color, right? I sort of think this type of keyboard sound is the most perfect for this, right? That's a major seventh, right? There's another major seventh chord. I sometimes jokingly or not jokingly call this the welcome to the lounge chord, right? Because when you're in the lounge, you don't want to go anywhere, right? You've got everything you need in this chord. This is a hanging out chord. This is a stay for a while. I mean, my shoes are off, right? We're not going anywhere, right? That's a major seventh chord, and it's got that wonderful bright color. It's really, really, really spectacular. Now, let's contrast that with another seventh chord that's built on a major triad. So we already know that the bottom 3 notes, C, E, G, are going to be the same here, right? Which is amazing. So we've got a 4-note chord. 3 out of the 4 notes are the same, but it's going to have a markedly different feel to it in particular. And we'll see what else it's got. So this is called the dominant seventh chord. And we can see the difference here. Like I said, the triad is the same, but the seventh is different. So instead of a major seventh from C to B natural, what kind of seventh do we have here on this dominant seventh chord? We've got a minor seventh from C to B flat. And all of a sudden, that major seventh chord, which is all about just staying put, becomes this dominant seventh chord. And this chord is all about going places, right? When we hear that minor seventh on top, that's all about motion, right? We can hear these ideas of sort of tension and resolution, right? Starting to come into play. So it's a significantly different functional purpose here. It's got this tritone from E to B flat, tritone, right? It's a diminished fifth. just a really, really, really strong sense of pushing forward. And all of that is just because one of the 4 notes in this chord has changed by a half step. I mean, you can just hear it, even just playing these chords in isolation. It's amazing. And something else that really stands out to me is, how we talk about these ideas of dissonance. Because if you would sort of just play these 2 types of sevenths on their own, the major seventh, I think, feels a lot more dissonant than the minor seventh, C to B flat. But it's the combination of all the notes, and it's especially the presence of the tritone. But it's the context, really, is the most critical thing here. That gives the dominant seventh a much, much more motion-oriented, functional purpose than the color-oriented purpose of the major seventh. Excuse me. So if we want to think about the distinction between these two, the major seventh in construction, the major seventh is a major triad plus a major seventh. The dominant seventh is a major triad plus a minor seventh. Now that does lead me to one thing I like to point out about the dominant seventh chord, which is that you will sometimes potentially hear this chord referred to as a major minor seventh chord, major minor 7, so big M, little m7. I don't find that, that term that's a name that I've pretty much only heard in the context of a theory class. Being out in the wild with the scariest thing ever, real musicians, you would never hear anybody say major minor 7. But just in case at some point in your life you're doing something in a classroom setting, and your teacher or the textbook or whatever uses the term major minor 7, they're referring to a dominant seventh chord. You're much more likely in the real world to hear people call dominant seventh, or frankly, in terms of chord naming, this chord right here, we would just call that C7. Straight up, right? C7. We would call this chord C major 7. All right, so that sort of gives you a little bit of a window. We haven't really talked about this yet, but gives you a little bit of a window into which of these chords tends to be more important based on the naming, but we'll get to that. Okay, so those are our 2 seventh chords that are built on a major triad. Oh, there it is, major minor 7. Forgot it was going to come up. It's so evil that I forgot it was even written there. Those are the ones built on a major triad. Let's talk about what happens if we want to use a minor triad as the foundation. And what we're going to find is that there really is only one chord that's typically built on the minor triad. We're going to talk about another one in the next video, but typically, or in a future video, typically we really only think about one for this option. And what I mean by that is there's only one that comes up naturally. We can always make more, and that's half the fun. But coming up naturally and in super common usage, there's only one. And so since there's only one, we give it kind of a straightforward name. It's called the minor 7th chord because it's the only one built on a minor triad. So our minor triad here, C, E flat, G. We've got the minor triad. And what kind of 7th do we have? C to B flat, a minor 7th, right? So all together, look at this. I would say that this chord, somewhat similar to the major 7th chord, tends to have a bit more of a color purpose. I think it's a little bit kind of in the middle where we could hear how this could lead us to function, right? So it's not quite as just colory as the major 7th chord. Maybe a little bit in between. But it's a really, really beautiful chord. So minor triad, minor 7, that's the minor 7th chord. Like I said, there is another one that we could see, but this is the one that by far is the most common. So unless you're sort of seeing something a little funky, if there's a minor triad and there's a seventh on it, this is by far the most likely thing that you're going to find. So that's pretty much what we want to look at here. We'll talk about what's going on with diminished chords next.